And I think fundamentally, we as human beings are so deeply interconnected, and death teaches us and shows us.
There are people who seem to carry more than their fair share of weight in this life. Tyler Henry is one of them. From the outside, his story reads like a remarkable rise. A quiet kid from a small California town who discovered an unusual gift, shared it with the world, and built a career that most people could only dream of. But beneath that story, running parallel to every milestone and every moment of success, has been a private battle with his own health that most people never fully saw coming. This is not a story about fame. It is not a story about celebrity readings or television ratings or whether or not you believe in what Tyler Henry does. This is a story about a human being who has faced some of the most frightening medical realities imaginable, not once, not twice, but repeatedly, and who has somehow continued to show up every single time. It is a story about resilience in its most honest, unglamorous form, and it deserves to be told fully from the very beginning. Tyler Henry Kowalski was born on January 13th, 1996, in Hanford, California, a quiet city tucked into the San Joaquin Valley. By most measures, his early childhood was ordinary. He grew up in a modest home, attended local schools, and by all outward appearances was just another kid navigating the usual rhythms of growing up in a mid-sized California town. But something was different about Tyler, and it became undeniable when he was around 10 years old. One night, he woke up with a feeling that he couldn't explain. It wasn't a nightmare exactly, and it wasn't just anxiety. It was something more specific, a deep and overwhelming sense that his grandmother was about to die. He was so disturbed by the feeling that he got up and tried to describe it to his mother, stumbling over his words, confused by his own emotions, not entirely sure whether to trust what he was feeling. And then, before he could even finish speaking, the phone rang. His father was on the line with news that no one in the family had expected. Tyler's grandmother had just passed away. That moment would define the rest of his life in ways that a 10-year-old could not possibly have understood yet. For Tyler, it was not a triumph or a revelation. It was terrifying and disorienting and deeply lonely in the way that only unusual experiences can be. He did not have the vocabulary to describe what had happened. He did not know words like premonition or clairvoyance. All he knew was that something inside him worked differently from everyone else, and in a world where being different is rarely celebrated, that knowledge came with a heavy cost. Growing up in a conservative community where spirituality was taken seriously, but the supernatural was often viewed with suspicion or even outright fear, Tyler faced reactions that ranged from curious fascination to outright condemnation. Middle school was particularly brutal. He was isolated, bullied, and frequently misunderstood. High school brought new tensions. Some people in his community believed his abilities were a divine gift. Others believed they were something dangerous, something that should be suppressed or feared. For a teenager already struggling to understand himself, navigating those reactions added an emotional burden that never fully lifted. Despite all of that, Tyler pressed forward. He began giving quiet readings to classmates and teachers at Sierra Pacific High School. Word spread the way it always does in small communities, quickly and with a mixture of wonder and whispered skepticism. He started charging modest fees for private sessions and spent time at a local metaphysical shop called the Cosmic Corral, where he found mentors who recognized in him a maturity and emotional depth that went far beyond his years. Determined to accelerate his path, he switched to homeschooling, graduated at 16, and went on to attend West Hills College with the goal of becoming a hospice nurse. He wanted to be present with people in the most vulnerable moments of their lives. That impulse, the need to offer comfort and connection in the face of death, has been central to everything he has done since. In 2014, before his career had fully taken off, before the television shows and a Netflix series and the sold-out tours, Tyler Henry came face to face with his own mortality in a way that had nothing to do with premonition or spiritual sensitivity. He suffered a stroke. The cause was a brain cyst that he had been living with since birth, entirely unknown, silently present, waiting. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors warned him that the situation was extremely serious. Any sudden movement, they told him could be fatal. For someone who had spent years thinking deeply about death, who had in some ways built his entire identity around the idea of communicating across that boundary, this experience hit differently. It was not abstract. It was not symbolic. It was a 20-something young man lying in a hospital bed, terrified, unable to move, genuinely unsure whether he was going to survive. He later spoke about how strange and humbling it was to confront physical mortality after years of engaging with it in such a conceptual way. Understanding death and experiencing the very real possibility of your own are not the same thing, and that distinction became painfully clear. He underwent brain surgery and recovered, though the road was not easy. What the experience left him with beyond the physical scars and the months of recovery was a heightened awareness of how fragile life actually is. He had known that intellectually for years. Now he knew it in his body. It was a knowledge that changed him, and according to those close to him, it deepened his sense of purpose rather than diminishing it. After recovering, Tyler's career moved quickly. In 2015, he appeared on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, delivering a reading for the family that connected them with their late father, Robert Kardashian Sr. The moment was widely shared and introduced him to an enormous audience almost overnight. The following year, in 2016, with Emmy-winning actor and host Michael Corbett serving as executive producer, Entertainment Television gave Tyler his own show. Hollywood Medium with Tyler Henry launched when he was just 19 years old, and the response was immediate. People were riveted. Critics were skeptical. The debate about what Tyler Henry was actually doing became a cultural conversation in its own right. He also published his first memoir, Between Two Worlds, Lessons from the Other Side, which opened a more personal window into his experiences than the fast-paced world of television ever could. The book traced the origins of his abilities, explored the mechanics of how readings felt from his perspective, and reflected on the deeper emotional truth of grief and connection that ran through all of his work. By 2019, Tyler had launched a live tour called Life Lessons I've Learned from the Departed, taking his work into packed theaters across the country. It was a natural evolution, a way to bring the intimacy of his readings to a larger audience without losing the emotional authenticity that made those readings meaningful. For many people who attended, it was a powerful experience. For Tyler, it represented the fullest expression yet of what he had been building since he was a teenager giving readings for $40 in Hanford. And then, early in 2020, everything stopped. While preparing backstage before one of his tour performances, Tyler was struck by a sharp, sudden pain in his chest. It was not the kind of pain you can breathe through or push past. One of his lungs had completely collapsed. The situation was immediately life-threatening. Instead of walking out onto a stage in front of an audience, waiting to witness something extraordinary, Tyler was rushed to a hospital, where he would spend months recovering from a medical emergency that had arrived with no warning whatsoever. It would be difficult to overstate how significant that moment was. At a time when his career was arguably at its peak momentum, when audiences were filling theaters and his name carried genuine cultural weight, his body simply gave out. There is something almost unbearably human about that. The reminder that no amount of success, no degree of public recognition, no spiritual understanding can exempt a person from the vulnerabilities of the physical body they inhabit. Tyler recovered. Once he was well enough, he returned to work with what those around him described as renewed clarity and purpose. He launched a new live experience called An Evening of Hope and Healing, a title that felt less like a marketing decision and more like a personal statement. After everything he had been through, helping people find some measure of comfort was not just a career. It was, by his own account, a form of survival. In 2022, Tyler's reach expanded significantly with the release of his Netflix series, Life After Death with Tyler Henry. Unlike his earlier television work, which had focused almost exclusively on readings for celebrity subjects, the Netflix series allowed for something more layered. It included a deeply personal subplot in which Tyler used his investigative instincts to trace his own family history, uncovering connections and stories from his maternal family's past that he had never known. It was a side of him that audiences had not seen before, and the response was substantial. The same year, he published his second book, Here and Hereafter, which moved beyond memoir into something closer to a guide for living. Drawing on years of connecting with people who had passed on and with the loved ones they left behind, Tyler focused on the lessons that tend to surface most consistently in those conversations. The regrets, the unfinished expressions of love, the things people wish they had done or said while there was still time. The book was an encouragement to readers to act on those things now, while the opportunity still exists, rather than waiting until it's too late. It was a message shaped deeply by Tyler's own life experience. A person who has faced multiple serious health crises before the age of 30 has a particular relationship with urgency, with the value of time, with the importance of not deferring the things that matter most. Just when it seemed as though Tyler's most serious health challenges were behind him, 2023 brought a sobering update. After weeks of persistent, debilitating headaches, Tyler sought medical attention and received news that was serious enough to require immediate action. A mass that he had carried since birth, the same type of congenital issue that had contributed to his 2014 stroke, had developed into a life-threatening problem once again. Surgery was necessary, and Tyler underwent the procedure, adding another chapter to a medical history that was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss as isolated incidents. For people who had followed his career closely, the news was alarming. For Tyler, it was familiar in the worst possible way. He had been here before, in a hospital, facing the uncertainty of a brain surgery, wondering what he would feel like on the other side of it. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from a single crisis, but from facing a series of them, from never quite being able to feel fully safe in your own body for any sustained period of time. Tyler has spoken about that exhaustion with honesty that is rare in someone whose public image is so carefully associated with calm and reassurance. He recovered again. He returned to work again. And he continued building toward the next phase of his career with the same quiet determination that had characterized everything he had done since he was a teenager in Hanford, trying to explain to his mother why he thought his grandmother was about to die. The beginning of 2025 brought news on two very different fronts, and the contrast between them captured something essential about what Tyler Henry's life has actually looked like behind the public-facing version of his story. Just 1 week after marrying his partner Clint Godwin, Tyler publicly revealed that he had undergone surgery to remove a colloid tumor located near the center of his brain. The tumor was non-cancerous, but its location and potential consequences were serious. Left untreated, it was capable of causing severe neurological symptoms, including intense headaches, vertigo, and potentially worse outcomes. The surgery was successful, and Tyler expressed genuine gratitude for the care he received and for the outcome. The timing was striking. A wedding and a brain surgery within the same week. Most people will never experience either of those things in the same year, let alone the same 7